Let's check out this cool MagSafe Meshtastic case that I made for my RAK Wireless board. It has an integrated magnet array that allows it to stick to the back of my iPhone 14. I copied an existing case design and added several tweaks for features that I couldn't live without. I'll link to my design, the original author's design, and the full build of materials in the description below. Thanks to multi-material 3D printing, I printed the case with these cool white graphics on the back. I added a QR code for meshtastic.org just to see if it would work, and amazingly it actually scans. On one side of the case, we have a cutout for the reset button and a USB-C port. On the other side is an inline switch for disconnecting the battery. Inside, we have the board from the RAK Wireless Mini Meshtastic Starter Kit, an 1800 mAh LiPo battery, the switch that we saw from the outside, and the Bluetooth PCB antenna that came with the RAK Starter Kit. The cover for the case has a magnet array inside that allows it to attach to the back of my phone. This case was a pretty easy print. I printed mine using black and white PETG filament. The cover does have some intentional thin spots, so I ended up spraying a thin layer of hairspray on the printer heat bed to act as a release agent when taking it off. One of the tweaks that I made from the original case design is for all the mounting holes to use heat set inserts for 2.5mm screws rather than screwing directly into the plastic. The power switch that we already saw is another feature that I added to avoid having to open the case to disconnect the battery. It was a little tricky trying to find a good size battery that would fit the remaining space inside the case. I'll put the exact one that I bought in the description below. The heart of this project is the WisBlock kit from RAK Wireless. I believe this is the smallest carrier board that they make. Their solderless board design is pretty cool, and I really like how modular it is. It comes with PCB antennas for both Bluetooth and the LoRa radio. It also comes with an SMA cable and a stubby SMA antenna. I'm going to use the cable, but I bought a better SMA antenna for this build. More on that later. I'm a big fan of these heat set inserts that are slightly tapered at the bottom. I like to size the holes so that the bottom of the insert will fit in the hole and be held in place by friction. Then I melt them into place with these special soldering iron tips that are made for heat set inserts. Usually the center of the iron tip goes in the center hole of the insert when you are doing this. Since I don't have the right size tip, I'm using an oversized one that makes good contact to transfer heat quickly. Now that the inserts are in, I need to cut off any melted plastic that rolled up around the edges so everything will fit together nicely when I screw things down. My X-Acto knife makes quick work of this, but the mounting posts for the RAK board are a little more challenging to get to, so I'll switch to using a chisel point X-Acto blade to trim the melted plastic. Let's test fit a few things to make sure everything's going to fit. There's not much space between the power switch and the RAK board, so bending the leads on the switch should give us a little more room to work with. Nice, that's looking good. The SMA cable needs to go in first, since it will get routed towards the back of the case under the switch in the RAK board. I also need to make a little wire harness that connects the switch to the battery in the RAK board. I got some pre-made JST PH 2.0 pigtails that I'll mark and cut to a reasonable length for the space that's available. Now I can throw on some heat shrink tubing and solder everything up real quick. I decided to cut the extra lead off the switch to eliminate a potential area where things could short out. Alright, not bad. Let's make sure the SMA connector is screwed on tight. And now let's attach the switch to the case with some 2.5mm screws. Getting the screws threaded on the nuts is a little challenging given the tight space, but it's not too bad. Before we put the RAK board in, we need to insert the reset button extension that pokes through the case. Then again, using 2.5mm screws, let's tighten the board down. I want to throw the antenna on here now before I forget. I don't want to accidentally power the board on without the antenna attached and potentially break something. I tested this antenna with my vector network analyzer, and the SWR, also known as standing wave ratio, was about 1.6 across the 915 MHz band, which is pretty decent. The small SMA antenna that came with the RAK kit has an SWR of about 2.5, which isn't super great. Alright, so I'm being careful to route all the wires without kinking anything. Oh, and I forgot to mention that it's super important to take a look at the polarity of the LiPo battery connector in relation to what you'll be plugging it into, in this case the RAK board. I actually had to swap out the wires on my battery to avoid frying the RAK board. This is a really common issue because there's no standard polarity for these battery connections. My plan for the Bluetooth antenna is to just have it sit at the base of the battery. It would be better if it wasn't obstructed by the battery, but space is pretty limited, so at this point it'll have to do. Let's attach the cool magnet array to the cover now. I bought this 3-pack on Amazon for pretty cheap. You need to get the orientation right when putting these in the case because only one side of the magnets will be attracted to your phone. I hit the mounting surface with some isopropyl alcohol to make sure that it's clean and carefully separated the magnet array from the packaging material. The magnets have adhesive on both sides, which is why I printed some thin covers to stick to the exposed side so nothing unwanted will get stuck to them. Putting the cover on this is a little precarious because of all the wires, but it isn't too bad. I used some 2.5mm flathead screws that seat nicely into the countersunk holes in the case. I think this came out great. The MagSafe feature doesn't do any sort of charging or data transfer, but it's a fun feature to be able to stick it to the back of your phone and use it as a single unit on the go. Well, that's it for this build. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing. Alright, I'll catch you in the next one.